Amen. All right, so we're in the first chapter of Hosea. We didn't get very far out of that last week. Then we had the meeting, so that kind of puts us behind. But anyway, we're in chapter 1. And so as we look tonight, I want to kind of review back a little bit of what we covered last time. We talked about chapter 1, and then we'll get into it. As we look at Hosea, as we look at what he wrote, what God inspired him to write and put on paper for us to read at this time in our life, just keep in mind, I want to attack this as a two-parter. I want to clearly, for us to come away understanding what Hosea was saying to the children of Israel at that time. What God, through Hosea, was saying. What he was prophesying based on God's direction, and why some of these things happened. What did it mean at that time? So that when we look at it in our life, when we look at it as a part of our life, then we understand clearly, or we'll have a better, clearer understanding of what the application is for us. Because by understanding what God was telling the children of Israel, where they were at, and then we can find the applications that we need to find in the midst of all that was said, that we can take away there. So that's what I want to do. So as we look at tonight, as we start tonight, really, chapter 1, I'm going to come back, and like I said, we're going to look at 2 and 3, not in any detail, but verses 1 and 2, and then 3 and 4, we'll look at. And so we'll just kind of go through that, and then we'll, once we start in 4, then that's kind of where our focus will be tonight. So if you'll bear with me, I want to read the whole chapter, and then we'll come back. Verse 1, the word of Yahweh which came to Hosea the son of Berechiah in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, and in the days of Jeroboam the son of Joash, king of Israel. So which tribes fall under the king or Judah? How many tribes? And how many fall under Hezekiah, king of Judah? How many's in Judah? 2, yeah. And then how many are in Israel? 10, yeah. Well, I know that, and I want us to clarity there, because without a map, you kind of lose sight of who's where. So as we talked about in the first meeting, Hosea was living where? In which kingdom? Southern or northern?
Northern.
Now, he was living in the southern kingdom, but his prophecy, his mission, God's mission for him as a prophet was in the northern kingdom. That is correct. So anyway, so we go on there. When Yahweh first spoke through Hosea, Yahweh said to Hosea, "Go, take for yourself a wife of harlotry and children of harlotry, for the land commits flagrant harlotry, forsaking Yahweh." So he went and took Gomer, the daughter of Dublom, and she conceived and gave birth to a son for him. And Yahweh said to him, "Name him Jezreel for yet a little while, and I will visit the bloodshed of Jezreel upon the house of Jehu, and I will cause the kingdom of the house of Israel to cease. And it will be in that day that I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel." Then she conceived again and gave birth to a daughter, and Yahweh said to him, "Name her Ruhamah, for I will no longer have compassion on the house of Israel, and I will ever forgive them, that I would ever forgive them. But I'll have compassion on the house of Judah and save them by Yahweh their God, and I will not save them by bow, sword, battle, horses, or horsemen." Then she weaned Lo-ruham, and she conceived and gave birth to a son. And Yahweh said, "Name him Lo-ammi, for you're not my people, and I'm not your God. Yet the number of the sons of Israel will be like the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured or numbered. And it will be that in the place where it said to them, 'You are not my people,' it will be said to them, 'You are the sons of the living God.' And the sons of Judah and the sons of Israel will be gathered together, and they will set for themselves one head, and they will go up from the land, for great will be the day of Jezreel." All right. So as we look in chapter 1, as we begin to look at this, just a few things as we talked about there is that, Hosea's mission was the northern kingdom. That was his mission set. He lived in the southern kingdom, but his mission set was in there. So as we look at verse 2, what does Yahweh tell him to do? Or what does God tell him to do? What is God's direction to Hosea?
Became a prostitute.
Yep.
To marry
Wife of. Okay. So the question is, you said prostitute. So what do we, as we look at that, what at the time that he chose Gomer, what do we believe? Because the scripture is not 100% clear, but it for me it's a little clear. But it there. What's our stance on Gomer at the time that they married?
May not necessarily have been there yet.
That's my thought. I think God knew her heart. God knew her bent. God knew that was going to happen. That would be a part of her demeanor. But I don't think he went to the temple. Cause I don't read that he went to the temple and he got her. And we talked about it in that first meeting. How long did a normal Jewish marriage from start to finish act? Courtship, the whole thing. It's about a year, a good year. I mean, they did, they got betrothed, and they did X, and then they had to go through that whole process of how the money exchange, and all these things happened. And then they for lack of a bad term, but I'm going to use it just because that's the only one in my brain, they courted, through that process with the families and them together, and it was just an event that was a big event, not a small run to the courthouse, get the justice of peace, and say, hey, let's get married. So, go ahead. Somebody said that? Oh, Hosea. So Hosea just didn't go down the street and say, oh, there's Gomer. I like her. She looks good. I'm going to go get her. We're going to go to the courthouse and get married. That's not how you approach it. So the takeaway...
He didn't go about it the normal way. God told him what to do.
I got it. But God told him, but he still was in the Jewish culture. So he still followed the Jewish. He still did all the Jewish cultural things. Okay. He still followed the thing. Again, for a Jewish man to marry a harlot, what would happen in real life? What's God's rules on that? Yeah, exactly. So, exactly. God's rules, God put in place the things that said, hey, if you do this, then you die. They get stoned. Those are the things that happen. So for me, Hosea's process was in that he followed the Jewish culture, the Jewish ways of doing business, and how they did that whole marriage thing, and he followed those things. Their tradition.
What caused the public to ignore the fact that she was off the wall a little bit?
Well, one that probably caused it is what did we talk about? And during that time, for the women of that time, the men of that time, the Baal worshipers, what's the other ones? The temple, that was, for them, that had become norm. It was just a part of life.
Because they were running it out of the temple, number one.
Well, that's there. But again, one of the things I read, or a couple of things I read, said that during that time, the ideal, not that everybody practiced it, but the general ideal was that every woman would have sex in a temple one time in their life. And some of them would stay there 2 or 3 years before a man would pick them to have there. And they would have it with a strange man. And one of the guys was sharing that one of the traditional thoughts is that part of the temple worship was the man would come by, and if he saw you, he would throw a coin or something in your lap, and the more you got, there, and then eventually would walk around, choose you, they would go have sex, and then that would be it. So that was the tradition of the time. That was the attitude of the time.
They were really lost.
Yeah. Well, again, but how far are we off in that right now in our culture today? We're not that far. We don't have the temple with the Athena, the goddess, but Yeah, or whatever. Yeah, but we have, and the attitude of most in today's world is, hey, yeah, do it. Hey, it's okay.
Follow your
Again,
heart.
I've shared with you that I know I've been not confronted. I've in conversation, I have heard the comment come from someone who was living with another, saying, "I got it good. Me and God are good with this. Everything is good to go." That's the attitude. That's their attitude. Hey, I'm working. So that same person goes to church. Those people were going to church and doing all the things that, just like they were married and doing the right thing with God, as if they, anyway. My point is that I don't think our attitude about that kind of stuff is far off.
No,
Yeah.
not especially when the state sanctions.
And
Here
so,
in Texas,
yeah.
if you live together, or,
Yeah.
I mean, you don't even have to live together. Be together one night,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden you're married. What
So-
do you call it? Common law
Communion,
married. And so it's without any reference to the.
Yeah. So so take for yourself a wife of harlotry and the children of harlotry. And again, I guess the question we have to come to agreement with, or not agreement, we have to come to some kind of, and I'm going a little further than that, but yes, understanding is it. What I'm trying to get at is, to your point, Terry, you just automatically went to she was a harlot.
Right.
Well, again, you have to come to grips with God's sovereignty, and for me, would he, in the Jewish culture, he could. I'm saying that could all happen, but in the Jewish culture, I guess the question would God put Hosea in that spite that he would have to go into what Amber was alluding to, that he would face stoning, he would face ridicule, he would face.
I don't see how he could have done it. To be
Well,
honest with
I
you.
think the marriage started out as something,
No, yeah.
good, right? He didn't go out and, choose a
But-
harlot to begin with. He chose somebody he thought was good. Same as God with the relationship with Israel in the beginning was good, and then Israel went bad.
Yeah. So hang on to that thought.
You're saying that God sanctioned this deal between he and her, and
God knew what
So
was going to happen.
yeah. So the question though is, again, the question is, yes, that because as we get to the first child, who's the first child a product of? Who is Jezreel a product of?
it ain't him.
Yes, it is. It is.
It
That's
is
what.
Hosea?
Yeah, it's Hosea. Yes. The first child, to where you were going with it, Stephen. The first child was a product of Gomer and Hosea, the boy, Jezreel. He was a byproduct of their relationship. So again, and I guess I'm going through this process a little bit just because sometimes, and I've heard, we've talked about it several times. Sometimes we say God can't do something, but he can. But mine is the sovereignty of God. God, I think it's more about the sovereignty of God. I think that's why Hosea did what he did. You know what I'm saying? He married her.
God also says his word never changes, and from what we can see, it doesn't. So how does this does not represent him? It doesn't seem to represent him.
Who?
God in any way. Think about it. If his word says don't do that, he means don't do
Yeah,
it.
he
There's
did.
no slack.
Hold on. Yeah.
This is written in. This is
Yeah, that's-
Hosea writing this in past tense. What we're saying is more than likely.
Yes.
Don't know because it's not written out. She was not that way when they got married.
That's what I'm saying.
She was clean and pure, but then she became
Came,
this person.
right.
So he's writing this after.
Oh, so
Yeah.
he's cleaning her up. Basically.
Yeah. Well, no.
She-
Other way
while
around.
Was
She was
clean and
clean
pure,
when they got
had
married.
not had sex with anybody.
How could she be clean
Listen,
already if she was already
listen.
on it?
Because she wasn't. That's what we're trying to
When
tell
they
you.
got married.
When they
and
got
then
married-
She stepped outside of the marriage.
All right,
That's-
I thought she was a harlot. The
No.
whole time. I didn't know.
No.
He's
No.
writing this
Okay.
from. He's writing this from. It's already happened, and he's come back and
Five-
writing this, and she's become.
Right.
Now we don't know for sure
Yeah.
because it's not written down anywhere.
Yeah.
But more than likely,
Yes.
she was clean and pure in all the things she was supposed to be when they
Right.
I think.
Exactly.
Then
And
later in the marriage, she made these choices to do stuff. She wasn't
And-
supposed to, so that became attached.
right,
So her sin came to play after the fact.
right. But yes,
She made choices.
she made choices to do because of her anyway. Yes, she made the choices later. To Amber's point, this Hosea was probably writing this 3, 4, 5 years after things had went down the road. He's reaccounting them for God. In other words, God gave him guidance and say, "Hey, I want you to write this stuff down." And so So to Amber's point, that's what I don't believe that at the first time they went through the process, from the time they betrothed to each other and they went all the way through, I don't think Gomer
Since
was.
the first kid was his,
Yeah.
that kind of pissed
Yes.
her off.
Yeah. And again, it was written after the fact. So, but what's unique about that is, as he writes backwards, as he recounts this event, and thus he does use the word harlotry there. What is that when it comes? What's he saying to the children of Israel? Because when God brought Abraham in the covenant,
I think he's saying to the children of Israel, it's okay if I say so, which makes him sorry.
no, that's not what.
This is what you did to me.
This is what the description is exactly
Oh, I see
what
what
the
you're saying.
children of
Okay,
Israel
their
did.
behavior.
Because
Their
when
behavior. I see what you're saying.
and then when God and Abraham made the covenant, there was no issues at that point. The issues came as they began to live. Then God writes back to them and says, "These are the things you've done to me. You've been a harlot with the local gods and the local things that are around you. You've been a harlot with them because I'm your husband. You're my wife, so to speak." So Hosea representing God and Gomer representing the children of Israel. That's what God is saying to them. That through Hosea, God is saying to you, "You are this. This is you." Because if the children of Israel read this, what would they think? Just, without any explanation, they just read this story, this event.
Well, they had already taken place.
Would they thought it was them, or would they have thought it was something else? Without Hosea if they exactly, they would have never put it on themselves, because that's what Paul did. When Paul wrote in Romans, what was he telling them? You're it. Tag, you it. This is not a story made up about somebody else. This is about you. Yeah, and that's what Hosea is doing here. As he prophesied, as he's the prophet for God to them during this period of time, he is bringing to realization to them that you're Gomer. That's you. You started out, to Amber's, you
So
started
what you
out
were
okay.
saying- What you were saying were the people that you met that had okayed this in their mind when you were talking to them, that you got the idea that they had been twisted. The world's view of this kind of behavior had been twisted so bad, they now believe that it's okay, that that's the way to go, that it doesn't matter, it's not important. You know, God's word, He's changed it, or whatever they would say to themselves when they decide to go and do just about anything they want to nowadays. But you see, I think I got what you're talking about now.
Well, again,
What your
that's
reference was?
exactly it. They took what God has said, and they've tried, because their belief.
Justified it to themselves.
Well,
Twisted.
and it's the same for me. Their idea of God is He's love, so He's never going to send nobody to hell.
We're the chosen one.
Yeah, and because they were born and raised in church, then everything's going to be okay. That was their thought process. And did not the Jewish people think the same way? I do this. I check all the blocks every week. I check the blocks. I go do my sacrifices. I go to the temple. I say my prayers. I do all this stuff, and so I'm good. No matter what I do out here in the world, I'm good. And that's, again, what Hosea, I think, is trying to say to them is, no, you don't. You're not good. You're Gomer. You're a harlot to God because you have slept with the world.
Yeah.
You have given your soul to them. You've allowed that to go. And then he goes on to say, so he went took Gomer the daughter. So he tells they did, and Yahweh said to him, name. So he went to Gomer the daughter, and she conceived and gave birth to a son for what does yours say? She conceived and gave birth, or what? The latter part of 3.
Just bore him a son.
Okay, bore him.
Conceived and bore him a son.
Conceived and bore him.
Him. So who is him?
Hosea.
Hosea. Because when we read the next 2 verses, you ain't going to hear the word him. All right. So that's a big deal. That's a big deal. And so for the Israelites, their takeaway would be, or Hosea would be prophesying to them what? That you started out good. We had a relationship. We had a relationship that worked between God and the children of Israel. We're going to see in the next 2 children that ain't a true statement no more. So he goes on, and and they named him what?
Jezreel.
Anybody tell me about Jezreel? Anybody remember some biblical? There's a valley called Jezreel. But Jehu.
Jehu, that's who it was.
Yes. But who were the 2 big components? At that, what happened in that? Who remembers what happened during that time? Yeah, he was the king. He was one of their kings. But there was an event happened. When we talk about women who get out of hand and overstep themselves sometimes, what do we call them? Jezebel. So who were part of that thing? And what happened with Jezebel and
Gomer.
No. Gomer. This happened a long time before.
This was Ahab.
Ahab and Jezebel. What did they do?
That was the one where he drove a stake through his temple.
That's one of the parts of the story. But the event I'm trying to what did they do to the good guy when he wouldn't sell them the land? And Jezebel said, "Well, I'll get it for you."
Oh,
You remember what I'm talking about? Is that ringing the bell? Anyway, Jezebel kills them, basically, gets them killed, and so they can steal the land. The guy that was killed was not a bad man. He was a good guy. He was there. They killed it, and because of that, a lot of things transpired over time, and we won't go in that historical event. But Jezebel, Jehu, all that happened during that time, and that was a part of that deal in that valley. And so, what happened to Jehu? What happened to Jehu at the time?
I don't know. I must remember what happened to Jezebel.
Well,
Was the dog sleeping on the body?
Jehu was king. Yeah, that's the story where she got ate up.
What happened to him? I can't remember.
Well, Ahab got killed. He got killed as well. She got ate up by dogs. She got killed, got ate up by dogs. What I'm trying, the point where I'm going with this, I guess, is I'm trying to get to, is that in that deal, Jehu, the king, the Jewish king, was a good guy when he started. But he ended up to what did God end up doing to Jehu? To get him gone. He worked through that. He worked through that. So,
Ahab's family line, he ended Ahab's family line,
right.
right?
Yep. So yes, exactly. Anyway,
I forget what verse it was. It said something about friendship of the world.
So why would God call this child Jezreel? Jezreel.
Only because I just looked at
Yeah. No. So why would he? What is significant about the name Jezreel? First of all, what's significant about it that he called him Jezreel instead of what's the typical Jewish your father? John the Baptist was named John the Baptist, and he wasn't named after his father. So God had used this chance to call him something other than what would be a normal. The firstborn son to a father generally got some connection to his father in the naming of it. So, in the naming of it. So, as we look at it, there he called him Jezreel. I got a few. Jezreel. His name means God will sow. God will sow. So what is, as we look at some, I think also it could be said God will cast there. So why would God call this boy Jezreel something that means I will sow, or God will sow, God will cast? What is God saying to the children of Israel? It's coming. Yeah. God's coming. The punishment is coming. So it's not happening right then, but it's coming. So that there. So in the name of Jezreel, God is saying to the children of Israel, it's coming. What was coming? Did anybody remember any historical stuff?
The judgment finally is going to come.
Yeah.
The violence that he's been saying.
Right.
Captivity is going to-
Yeah, so the judgment for them at this point in the game, what was the judgment? What did it end up being? Captivity. Yes, captivity. Exactly. Is that all? God didn't always use captivity to correct the Israelites, but in this chance, this is what he was doing. So God was saying to them through Hosea, it's coming. You have passed the point of no return. It is coming. I will end this. We will fix this. I will end this season of your life. I will end it so that you come back to me. Is that not what God has done through them for all the years that they were there? Is they would get right, they would get lost in God, they would stray from Him. God would take them into captivity or some kind of punishment, and then they would come back to Him, and they would start the cycle all over.
What this says the name Jezreel symbolizes both the blessing of God to the abundance that the valley of Jezreel,
Right.
but it
Who?
also was a place of a lot of major battles.
Yeah.
So they said and then you see the consequences of sin and violence. So the tension between divine judgment and the hope of redemption.
Oh.
Because that same valley of Jezreel was fertile and had all these great
Yes.
things that it provided, but then also was the site of a lot of really bloodshed battles. So that's where the Jezreel,
Who?
blessings that have been bestowed upon them, but now the consequences
Cool.
of sin and
Good deal. No, good take. And so for us as we look at that, is God, because again, to Amber's point, I might not know what it all means, but for a Jewish person to hear Hosea say the things that God had him say to them, those would be the things. What Amber just read would have been what stood out to them. That would have been their takeaway. They would clearly understood what he was trying to say, what God was trying to say. It wouldn't have been a mystery to them. So in that light, as we look at it as God looks at us as Christians, as God looks at us as at the thing, His mercy, His grace that comes to us comes out of the abundance of His blessings that He offers us, realizing that there's things that people, as His providence comes to bear in today's world, there's people who know there's a God, but they don't know God. You know what I'm saying? They know that their God exists, but they don't know God. They've seen the general blessings that God gives to the world in general, and in that midst, that doesn't change their mind. That doesn't allow for God to direct His call to them, because it doesn't register with them.
They may know of God, but their heart hadn't been changed by it.
That again, yes, I think that there's. So, what does the Scripture say about the just and the unjust?
God reigns on the just and unjust.
So God reigns on the just and the unjust, right? So to Amber's point, the children of Israel knew the blessings that they had received from the point of Moses bringing them out of Egypt to that point. all those things that happened over time. They knew the story of Noah. They knew the story of Abraham. They knew the things that God had blessed them with, and the promises that God. But even in the midst of all that abundance, it still became, what's the word I'm looking for? It became a place of loss, a place of breaking their.
Had they gotten rich as a people?
They didn't lack. I mean, I'm sure that there's some that were rich. I'm sure there were some that were poor. But I think
they were all doing okay.
It depends on the different tribes.
right. That's what I've thinking. Yeah, there would have been people who would have been rich, and there have been people who would not, and it had been trouble. But I think it's what Amber was saying to us through what she was reading. That was the fact that the children of Israel, in all their time, and particularly at this time, they knew what God had done for them, but yet they still gave in to.
Well, they didn't do what God said because they didn't get rid of the people that were serving the other gods,
Yeah.
and they wouldn't do the land.
Who?
And so they started serving
Yeah.
other gods.
Right.
My commentary says that Hosea began prophesying at the end of the period of material prosperity under King Jeroboam.
Right.
And then, unfortunately, however, during most of his lifetime, the people were spiritually bankrupt. And it just went downhill from there.
So even
They really were good.
even though they were in a prosperity time, their spiritual
It
side
seems
was.
like those two run hand in hand, don't they?
Yeah, when things are good, well, I don't need God.
Yeah, exactly. We don't need God anymore. Besides that,
Worshiping this and worshiping
Did
that.
he really send this, or did I do it
Things
myself?
get bad, we're like, oh, God help us.
Yep. Yep.
It's the same cycle.
Yep. Same
Who
cycle.
was it that said something about? And I don't remember whether it was said directly to women or men and women both. That enmity, let's see, friendship with the world was enmity towards the Lord or toward God.
Yeah, it was everybody.
Was that Paul said that?
I'd have to think on that. Okay, and then I'm gonna try to move us down the line. As we look at Jezreel as the firstborn, and then in that day I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel. So as God says to them, as the prophecy from Hosea is that the Israel will be broken in that. And then Gomer conceived again and gave birth to a daughter, and Yahweh said to him, name her Lo-Ruhamah, for I will no longer have compassion on the house of Israel, that I would ever forgive them.
If they had kids and all that, and had a husband and wife, and married and all that, and she ran off on her own, didn't she? Was she at like an info or something?
I don't
know how to put it.
I
He's laughing, but he knows I don't have no better word than that.
well,
Lack of a better word, that's all I can come up with.
so
That she just couldn't take it.
It's just
out on the
unfaithful.
streets.
It's just like when we follow
yes.
the
Is that
will of the
correct? I mean, I
flesh
just-
versus the
no,
will of God.
unfaithfulness. I think it's just plain old.
plain
I think it's unfaithful because again, we talked about before when she conceived the son, it was with Hosea. Now we see her conceive a daughter, and we don't see it with Hosea. We see it was with someone else. Now again, I can't put her in one of the temples of Baal or any of I can't put her into that, but I can say that her life, she had begun to change as and her mind, her heart began to stray from Hosea as a husband, even in the midst of all that was going on.
When you went back and picked her up, what do you do?
Well,
We
we ain't got there yet. That's chapters yet. We're just talking about the three children right now, and so what is the name that God gave the girl? And what does it mean?
No mercy.
No mercy. So what's God saying through Hosea, and the name of that child, what is God saying to the children of Israel? Again, we go back to what we said a while ago.
It's coming.
It's coming. You've passed the point of no return with me. It's coming. and that's probably not a good way to say it. There's probably a better way to say that.
I mean, they're gonna get the consequences for their actions.
Thank you.
Mercy is
That-
not getting what you deserve.
That's right.
So they're gonna get what they put on.
Cool. Yep. God's grace is no longer going to be with them for right now.
And I think that grace can still be there.
Yep.
They're getting mercy, because mercy's not getting what you do deserve for a punishment.
Yeah.
So him still not pouring out his full rough wrath.
Well, that's
what
true.
he deserved is death.
Yeah.
I mean, he's still having grace with them.
Yeah.
But I think that he pulled back the mercy and he's giving them the consequence for their sin.
Cool. Because again, as we talked about before, the punishment for adultery is death.
Now he's not doing it. Gomer's the one doing it. Right?
Yeah. No. Yes, it's. But again,
Does he have to pay too?
no.
I thought since they was married,
No,
maybe had to pay.
he has the right. He could have had her stoned. Jose could have punished her in a bunch of with a myriad of things, from having her stoned to public display of where she was, there, all kinds of stuff. Divorce. I mean, there was a myriad of things that he could have done to her. Again, I think what Amber was saying there, God had a myriad of things he could have done to the children of Israel at this time. He chose one, but he didn't give them again, he could have killed them. He could have had them destroyed. Totally. But he didn't. We'll see as we get into the next as we get into the chapters, we'll get all that stuff. So just so I can move on there, we'll probably come back and just pick this up.
There's where you mean it rains on the just and the unjust altogether, or the unjust altogether.
No, what I was trying to say there is God has things that he has set in motion at creation, that he set in motion in life, that there's things. Rain happens no matter whether you're good or bad or saved or lost. Things happen. Death happens no matter whether you're lost or saved. Things happen because God put them in motion.
Well,
and some of them are good.
If half of our society is acting up, what you're saying is the other half will actually have to pay for it as well.
Potentially,
Because we
yes.
didn't do nothing
Yeah,
about it.
yes. Potentially, yes. Potentially.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm not.
That's why I like
Again, we without a lot of speculation, I could say that there were some good people, but you have to assume that there was some Jewish people who were not doing what the other Jewish part of the Israelites were doing in the northern kingdom. They were not doing it. You have to assume that there were some that were being obedient, did the things they were supposed to do. Again, there. But again, and then the last child, and again, this son was born, and again, he's not a product of Hosea, and his name is Lo-Ami, for you are not my people, and I'm not. That's pretty cut and dry. You ain't my people no more, and you ain't my God. And I ain't your God.
Wow.
So, but again, there's still mercy because we've seen God over time as we read the Old Testament, as we see God deal with the children of Israel, as we see God deal with the enemies of the children of Israel, we see that God is definitely holding back mercy. He's punishing them, and there will be a punishment, but it is not exactly what he could have done. God could have Sodom and Gomorrah them. He could have.
He didn't wipe them out.
Yes, he did
It
not.
sounds like it was just as bad. That's what it sounds like.
Well, yeah, because as we come back and we look at it, so as God is directing this toward the northern kingdom, what's going on in the southern kingdom at this time? You kind of read between the lines.
They're not experiencing.
They're not. Yes.
As he said.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Because God goes on to say, Yet the number of the sons of Israel will be like the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured or numbered. And it will be that in the place where it is said to them, you are not my people, it will be said to them, you are the sons of the living God. And the sons of Judah and the sons of Israel will be gathered together, and they will get. So God, in the midst of all that he's about to do to them and all that he's going to do, God gives them what? In verses 10 and 11. Hope.
What's happening in the South at the same time?
They're
having to worry about it?
They're not, at this point, they will, it'll come, but at this point in the game, so to speak, in the time period, the South is having some issues, but it is not what has happened in the North. The North has taken it to the nth degree. The North has jumped off lock, stock, and barrel right in the midst of the mud puddle up there, and they were swimming with the pigs, so to speak. And that was not happening in the South.
Seems like we got some of the same problems these days.
But and again, we'll come back a little bit. But for me, in all that God did with Hosea and what God shows and what God is saying to the children of Israel, in verse 10 and 11, he brings back what? Hope. He gives them hope. There's a hope. Because what's going to happen in verse 11? What does it say in verse 11? Judah and Israel will come back together, and they will set themselves what?
One head.
One head, and it will go up from the land, for great will be the day of Jezreel. And that goes back to what Amber shared with us a while ago, and that in the idea of Jezreel, and that the abundance that what happens there, God's saying to them, there's hope that we can come back to that relationship, that idea, that type of stuff. Cool. All right. Thank you, Amber. Thank y'all all for being there, and appreciate that. We'll be back next week, and we'll get into chapter 2, because really, if you take last part of what we call chapter 1 and you sneak into chapter 2, that kind of fits together. So, cool.